Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am said Eastern Forest. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for subscribing, if you haven't already, to the podcast. And for everyone who has given it a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we do appreciate that. Thank you very much. This week, I have a conversation with Maddie Halsall, who is a musician, a producer, a trumpeter, composer, and he's the founder of Gondwana Records as well. But he has a wonderful new record called Salute to the Sun that I just got into. I think I discovered him on Spotify a while back. And I was like, man, this reminds me of Alice Coltrane a bit, like spirit-infused modern jazz. It's just groovy. So you should check it out for sure, the music. But I just wanted to learn more about who are you and how are you directing music in this direction. And he was gracious enough to come on board. And since then, I've discovered his entire label, Gondwana Records, has a lot of amazing artists. Portico Quartet is on there. And he's also puts out various playlists that he keeps adding to that are equally amazing. So I think he's got one, I think it's called Weekly Meditation or something like that. It's just all this music he likes. I think it's up to 24 hours. So I'll often just put that on, hit shuffle, and just continually discover new stuff. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation a lot. It's about music and the energy of music and creativity, and you're going to dig it. I also just want to say thanks to everyone who has signed up to be part of the East Forest Council on Patreon. We continue the experiment. We had our first monthly Zoom council, so that's one of the tiers of membership in the Patreon Council. But I'm also shared some bonus stuff from the podcast, a solo cast I recorded, I put over there, and some unreleased music. I got to share a track. So I'll continue to do more things like this, and I have some ideas for a couple live stream things that I'm going to do over on Patreon soon. So check it out. See if it speaks to you, and if you want to be part of this experiment of the East Forest Council, sort of a centralized space for us to connect and gather, and thank you also for that support. Eastforest.org. Just scroll down. You'll see the information there on the homepage, or also patreon.com/eastforest. I think since the last time I did the podcast last week, it was Eric L. and Matthew L., Rob H., Chuck R.E. signed up, maybe Gabriella, Jay, and Deuce. It's one way to put your name. Deuce. Vishnu, Derek H. Some of you guys I think were from the week before, but thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm looking forward to continuing that experiment. And we're still trying to put those events together in different markets in the U.S. So we have a tour that you can sign up still via the Light Network. It's kind of like you pledge your interest in a particular city, and that helps us know if we can pull the trigger and get a venue and then sell hard tickets. So if you'd like to check that out and see some of the cities we're looking at in the near future, that's also at eastforest.org/tour. Last other pieces of business, it looks like the East Forest Retreat in southern Utah, the one we're doing this fall, September 30th through October 3rd or 4th, whatever it is sold out. But if you want to join the wait list, you can still do that. Just email team@eastforest.org, and we'll let you know if a spot opens up. And we're also exploring a few other retreat options in 2022. Hopefully we'll get back to Esalen. There's some possibility of something in Mexico, so we'll let you know. And I'm going to be going to Costa Rica for my first ever gig in over a year publicly in the world, and it's blowing my fucking mind that I'm going to be getting on a plane and I'm doing a benefit for Fight for the Forgotten, Justin Wren's wonderful organization, and that's where they're doing it. And I said, well, if we can make this happen, I'd love to help, and they're making it happen. So kudos to them. Please wish me good fortune as it feels great. It feels like insane to me to get on a plane with equipment and then go play somewhere. Not just because of COVID, but it hasn't happened now. And I was doing that so often, and now it feels weird. So I'm trying to be gentle with myself. I didn't expect the first excursion to be international, but I'm very grateful and looking forward to just the opportunity to go and doing everything I can to make it a safe, successful trip for everyone involved. So thank you to Brian and Justin and everyone who's helped make that happen. I think it's the benefits happening just before Aubrey Marcus's Fit for Service thing they do down there. So, it's related to Aubrey too. Thank you, Aubrey. I'd love to have him back on the show as well. I if you didn't catch Aubrey's episode about his darkness retreat, check it out. And Justin Wren was recently on the show, which another amazing podcast. So dive in if you can. All right, friends, I'll have some news for you in the coming weeks about new music and releases coming out. Lots of wonderful stuff, but we'll keep it simple for now. I've got my head down into the creative spaces, and I'm really enjoying spring sprunging, as it were, and just a little bit of a light at any tunnel that we continue to be swimming down. You know how it goes. But let's get into this. Let's get into this great conversation with our dear friend, Matthew Halsall. Boom. Matthew Halsall, right? That's how I'm supposed to say it. Halsall. Halsall. Matthew Halsall. I know. I was just saying to you that I've only read your name and listened to your music, so it sounds like I don't know who you are, but I feel like I know you a bit. But then you get to this place of like, I have to say it to the man himself. It makes me a bit nervous. I get very self-conscious about that, so I apologize.
It's all good. Don't worry.
So you're coming to us from the UK, and I wanted to reach out to you, quick background, because, like a lot of people, I discover music on Spotify, and it started to play some of your tracks, and they definitely perked up my ears, and I got into it. I was down in southern Utah in my sauna a lot, and I just went on these deep dives, and it was sort of casual. And then I was like, man, I'm really into this. I'm into a lot of music, but I got really into some of your work. And then you had a new record, Salute to the Sun, which I think is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah. And so I just thought it'd be fun to reach out. It's one of the benefits of the podcast is I get to, in a small way, amplify other people's work, but also get to meet some folks. So great to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks, man. So can you tell us a bit about, I was digging into the record and what you've talked about it, and you described it as, is it right to say it's sort of spiritual jazz as a genre?
I'm not sure as a genre, but maybe from my perspective of who I am as an individual, and the music I make represents a lot of elements of my personality. And when I was younger, I started studying meditation and yoga and Eastern philosophies, even from the age of 14 years old. So it's quite people describe my music as meditative and spiritual and kind of all sorts of things. So I guess, there is a sort of new subgenre, spiritual jazz, that seems to be dominating the kind of way of describing my music at the moment. So yeah.
Who else would you put in that like contemporary genre? Because it's not a phrase I'd heard before, and it's right up my alley. People say the same things about my music, but we make different kinds of music. So I'm really interested in like what are those constituent parts that bring it together?
Well, I guess it's music that has a kind of mellow, meditative quality that is, even things like the track titles and the kind of angle and character of the person making the music is important. So, my first experience of what I would call spiritual jazz would obviously be John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders, and John Coltrane even named a track Spiritual, and Alice Coltrane's album Journey in Satchidananda is all about the sort of a spiritual meditative kind of journey. And people like Yusef Lateef and Don Cherry are very spiritual individuals. So they're the kind of old school teachers for me. I guess more contemporary people would be the likes of Dwight Tribble. There's a great band from London called Wildflower, and another London band called Maisha. There's also from Manchester Nat Birchall, and I could list. I have actually a playlist on Spotify and Apple Music and Deezer, and it's hopefully I'm going to keep put it on other platforms as well. I have to do it manually, annoyingly. It's a bit of a slow process.
Is that the one that's really long? Because I've listened to one that I think was like, I don't know, 8 or 12 hours. I went through the whole thing over a week. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's called Weekly Meditations, and that's, I guess, what I would class as spiritual music, meditative music. And it's now, I'm just checking now, it's got 23 hours and 29 minutes of music.
So you're almost there to a full day.
Yeah. We're getting close. And I set that up actually at the beginning of lockdown as in fact, maybe even before lockdown, as an idea of a place where people always ask me what are my favorite musicians and influences, and this is a really nice way of just going, here's my world. So
there's a cool breadth that dips into African sounds, and there's some Latin sounds. There's some contemporary, some hip hop and influences in there. The playlist I heard, I don't know if it's the same one, but there's another one that's very long that I dug into that you made. Is it the same
there's
one?
also I have a radio show on Worldwide FM, and that features all the stuff that my record label is kind of into. The sort of, if you like, it's the kind of office sound of the record label, what we're kind of into. It's quite contemporary, that playlist. So whereas the Weekly Meditations is anything from like the sort of 50s right through to present times. So
that's cool. Yeah, there was a Nina Simone track on there that I hadn't heard before. That was really cool. I think Baltimore. Yeah. So I mean, there's some deep cuts in there that was unfamiliar to me. But going back, you said that you had a very early introduction, in a sense, to spirituality. I mean, I would assume that wasn't exactly normal at that time. Was it Manchester where you grew up as well?
Yeah, it was quite a very unique and special journey for me. I had a really happy childhood. I'm very fond of my family, and it was great. But I really struggled with education for some reason. I just didn't. I enjoyed meeting the other students, and I liked all the creative stuff, and I actually liked sport and the sort of physical exercise and education side of things. But for some reason I just didn't have a good journey through education, and was in my last 2 years of what we have as called the GCSEs in England, and it was time to maybe try something different because I really wasn't happy. So my mum's quite a spiritual and creative, mellow character, and she read about this school called the Maharishi School, where they did transcendental meditation and yoga before you started your studies and at the end of the day as well. And there was lots of kind of classes in addition to the sort of education system where we would learn things like study Sanskrit and do lots of chanting and kind of read a lot about ways of peaceful and positive ways of living life and healthy diets and all sorts of stuff. So it's kind of creative intelligence and scientific kind of conversations and stuff. It was great. It was a real deep place to go, and the classes weren't very big. They were only 10 people in a class, so it was mellow in that sense as well. Pretty much all the other students in my class had been there since primary school, so they'd been there from a very early age.
Little Yodas, little Buddhas,
sorry?
Maybe.
Sorry?
Were they like little Buddhas? You know, if they've been doing that since.
They do you know what, their personality and character and intelligence was incredible. Like I'm still good friends with all of them now. They're really, really special, individuals, and they were really supportive and warm and welcoming, and they focused on celebrating a lot of the positive things in my life and making me feel better about those things. So they loved hearing about the music, because when I started playing trumpet when I was 6 years old, and I was touring. I was getting paid for gigs by the time I was about 13 years old. And by the time I was 14, which is when I joined the school, I was actually touring a lot of the world, playing with big bands and stuff as
Wow.
A sort of young featured artist within the big band. So I went to places like Australia and Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, and I went to Russia, and I actually played in America in New Orleans at a jazz festival when I was 14 or 15.
Wow. Was it big band music?
Yeah, it was kind of big band arrangements of famous kind of, a lot of trumpet based stuff like Dizzy Gillespie arrangements and Miles Davis tunes, and a lot of Art Blakey and kind of stuff that was like heavyweight kind of drum driven stuff. So it was a really good place to sort of learn a lot about music, about the dynamics and the kind of musicians and culture around jazz. Yeah, it was cool.
Did you, when you were doing that, were you guys playing kind of like bebop style too? And do you feel like you have to get your fingers around that kind of stuff in order then to play the mellow, soulful, especially the ballads? I think of like Miles Davis, and how he started out in that era.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly remember playing. There's a Miles Davis tune called Four, and I memorized his solo and actually played it in a big band when I think I was about 14 when I did that. I think there's a recording of it somewhere, God knows where, but and so that's quite a kind of boppy, upbeat tune. I would practice a lot of Charlie Parker and Dizzy tunes, and studied quite a lot of that. With big band music, a lot of the phrasing is quite boppy. It's just kind of spread over loads of instruments. So yeah, I guess bebop was there, but I was always drawn to the was the sort of mellower side of jazz for some reason, and also other music like the Beatles and Rolling Stones and kind of Beach Boys and stuff. I liked all the sort of dreamy, mellow music, even in electronic music. I like a lot of the chilled out stuff. So it's just part of my personality. But
Yeah. You mentioned Cinematic Orchestra and Aphex Twin, Boards of Canada. I mean, a lot of things I also felt were influences to me as well. But in a lot of ways, you hear about the challenges, like the way you weren't fitting into that school system, and it kind of led you. It was a bit of a gift in a way, because it sounds like these early introductions to Eastern ideas and soulful ideas, I would imagine, certainly influenced your music, but even though there's this natural momentum moving in that direction, I don't know how much you were playing and moving in that direction at that age, but would you say that was a pretty big foundation of like even your latest record?
yeah, I guess even on my new album, Salute to the Sun, the title is essentially a nod to the yoga that we were studying at that early age was sun salutations, and then, you know, things like mindfulness meditations are really important gifts that are still relevant and present in my life now. But I think there was a definite point where I was meditating and studying all this brilliant philosophy, kind of Maharishi transcendental meditation and philosophies of his, and there was this period where all of a sudden I was starting to discover that within jazz as well. When I first started out, I didn't really know any of the sort of deeper spiritual 60s, 70s stuff on Impulse or Strata East or Black Jazz. But when I was at the Maharishi school, I kind of started to become more and more curious on kind of any music that featured things like tempura drones and sitars and kind of Indian flutes or Eastern sounding flutes. And I was actually also really into DJ culture at this point, which was huge in the UK. In the 90s, it was the late 90s, DJs were bigger than live performers. As a sort of musician, you couldn't get a gig because every club was booked with a DJ. But you know, two of my favorite DJs that were really important and influential were Giles Peterson and Mr. Scruff from Manchester, and Giles lives in London. And I used to listen to Giles Peterson's show on Radio 1, which was called The Worldwide Show, which was brilliant, really eclectic mix of music. And Mr. Scruff was the same, and I used to go to his club nights. My friends' parents from the Maharishi school actually were big fans of Mr. Scruff and started taking us there as early as we possibly could get in, basically, which was amazing. Like they were two of the coolest parents I've ever met, really progressive, and kind of I became really good friends with them and their son, who is still one of my best friends, Will Curley, and his parents. We learned a lot together, you know, through that whole journey of DJ culture, going to clubs and listening to people. A lot of American DJs really inspired me in a different way, like brought me into the kind of maybe Detroit house and electro and techno stuff. I kind of found that really interesting as well, and really deep and soulful. Like, you know, it wasn't commercial electronic music. This was something with a identity and a feeling to it and a personality, and I think that's what I get excited about with I'm not so concerned about, you know, being part of a certain genre or kind of movement, or as a listener, kind of that stuff doesn't convince me. It's more what excites me and makes me want to be a musician is personalities and characters within music, and the hardest bit as a creative is trying to get your personality into the music. But some of the people I've named in the past, you know, Miles Davis is certainly a character, and John Coltrane's a deep character, and even Aphex Twin and you know, people like that, very interesting characters. People like Bjork as well. So it's kind of, I think I definitely get excited more about the whole experience and the journey and the connection with the individual. But
how do you convey that when you're putting together a band and it's a group of players, and there's definitely you're able to translate, you know, the kind of energy you want to come out in the music? So how do you actually try to get that to them in a musical language?
Well, I mean, as a composer, there's a sort of long personal process of writing where you sort of sat at home, either at the piano or using software or playing instruments and recording, and you sort of write the main theme and feeling of the tune, and then that's the beginning and the end of the tunes in my compositions in general. And then you show them the band, and you have quite a long chat and kind of go through the sound and the direction of the recordings you want to do. Tell them how to play to a certain level without restricting them to the point where they're not having fun. So I would say that it's more a case of, like, for drums and percussion, what ride cymbal to use, and the certain sounds of the snare drum, or the kind of percussive bells, or whether to use congas or something like that. And then you obviously talk to the rest of the band about the sort of solos and the kind of ups and downs and sort of dynamics of the track that you want. But most of it's, when you've got fantastic musicians working with you that actually care about the music that you're making and kind of feel a part of that journey, they do stuff that I could never explain as well. And you get into a creative space that is almost like psychic, like everyone's reading each other's minds and kind of in a beautiful kind of state of creativity.
Totally, man. Yeah. And for you, when you feel like you're in that flow or in that pocket of the feeling you're trying to get, that personality or that depth you're looking for personally, is there any connection or through line to those meditative states for you? Like, what is that? How do you feel when you feel like you're in that spot? And is there a connection to meditation?
There's definitely when you do group meditation, it's a very similar experience to when you're performing with a bunch of musicians and you're all connected to one focus. It's like a group mindfulness exercise where everyone is concentrating on the same thing and everyone's having a conversation, but without using words, and kind of they're expressing themselves on their instruments. It's a really powerful, deep feeling. Like when I'm on stage performing, I often just close my eyes and really just listen to the musicians, and I have a real deep meditative feeling when I'm in that headspace with those musicians. It's quite a magical thing, and I guess that's the beautiful thing about jazz music. It's quite a unique art form where it's kind of very, every time you're performing together, it's got a different energy, and
it's alive.
A moment and a live energy. That is really special.
Yeah, I listen to all kinds of music, and I feel that the music that I make because that's sort of like, in some ways, what comes out the most naturally, but it's also what I'm able to make. There's an issue of limitations and chops. And but to me, jazz music with not just the harmonic complexities and sort of options you have there, but this notion of the improvisational aspect and the conversation, it feels like one of the most evolved forms of music that we have. And I'm a lover of all types, and I don't really put in the time to try to become what I would consider a great jazz musician, but someone like Keith Jarrett is a huge influence on me, but he's the kind of guy also that literally could do anything. And but there just has this level of freedom of conversation, and I feel like that's really special. You hear it in other music for sure, but in jazz, it's often baked in as part of the structure.
Yeah, I guess the jazz music is quite a complex language that people study. Well, there's certain degrees of kind of jazz, and you can go as far. It's probably the most expansive genre there is, because the possibilities are so endless with scales and kind of the way you interact with each other and the instrumentation you use. And there's no real rules. You can play every single day in a different way. If you're angry, you could play really heavy angry stuff, but I guess it depends what your desire is. I also think of musicians and jazz, and you're having conversations, and I think the audience is really important as well, and being able to not get too self-indulged in a kind of conversation with the musicians on stage and forget about the listener. I think that's really important, because it's not just the musicians in the room, it's everyone that is, when someone puts on one of my records, they're listening to it on their own or with their friends, and kind of I think that there's an importance for them to feel an inclusion in the way they listen, and a really careful, kind of clear message. But it's hard to explain. But
no, I vibe that. That's a great point. Like, there is something very different about when there's just even one listener and you're performing anything. It changes things, and there's a conversation happening. And I'm wondering if you bring that into the studio at all. Like, when you have a group of musicians and you're recording the album, do you try to think of ways to keep that energy alive, of sort of like the witness or an audience, in a sense, if it's not a live recording, meaning not recorded at a concert?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we just record a lot. We record every week now. I built my own studio, and we've got a really relaxed setup and kind of approach with it all, where we meet up every Wednesday, and everyone records. We're in separate rooms, but we all have really nice headphone mixes, and the communication, we've got really used to that setup and that kind of approach. And the nice thing with that as well is, if you kind of trying to do something challenging and kind of different, and someone doesn't fully connect with that because you're recording with the isolation, you can take things out. The funny thing is, I always say that to relax the musicians and sort of say, don't worry, if you just play and see how you feel and how you connect with it, and if it's not right, we can take it out. But I very rarely end up needing to take anything away from the music, because people feel relaxed and end up playing really nice solos and kind of additional parts on the music. But I think you have to pick the right musicians. I spent a lot of time finding musicians that had a certain personality that was in some ways similar to mine, and in other ways would add the things that my personality was missing. So one of the things Miles Davis always did was like get a horn player that played all the kind of heavier, faster stuff, so he could kind of drop it down and play really mellow. And I'm definitely a mellow trumpet player, and I like having sax players and flute players that can kind of play in a slightly different way and add a different energy. And by the same token, like the piano player, I often like the piano to be really quite a energized and elevating solo instrument, and then the harp to be the opposite, to be the kind of mellow antidote to the record and music. So yeah, it's just about there's so many different things that happen, but when you get the right musicians and they start playing together, it is amazing.
Totally, man. And I've heard directors of movies say, like, what's the key to a great movie? It's like great casting. Like, how do you get great acting? Get great actors. Like, they do most of the work just by bringing themselves to the project. I wanted to ask you about the percussion sound too, because I've heard this term like tropical percussion that you used, and I'm definitely hearing a lot of inventiveness in thinking outside the traditional drum kit. And it changes things dramatically when you start adding those textures, both rhythmically, but more the sonic of it. Is that just something you like to play with and have fun with? Or is there a particular palette you like to work with?
So on the new album, Salute to the Sun, the main idea I had was to create a sort of a tropical and mellow sun-drenched zone for the listener. So when you put your headphones on, you escape into this nice place. As a writer, I think that music can take you to so many different places. It can create an atmosphere, it can create an energy and a mood, and it can be a great escape from reality. I love sitting at the piano with my headphones on, or kind of keyboards or whatever, and just shutting my eyes and trying to imagine a different space to live in and be in. And on this record, the other thing that I found myself really enjoying was when I was composing, listening to ambient field recordings of like jungles and rainforests.
No shit.
It's a new world for me. Some people do it. Some people listen to them just to get to sleep at night. But I was enjoying composing and kind of being creative over the top of them. And then those sounds of the on YouTube and places, you can get like 2 or 3 hour long sessions of ambient field recordings. It's quite good fun just sort of going through them and listening, and when you're listening and start in this different dimension, you sort of start hearing different instruments on your music, and it's a bit like if I was sat on a beach somewhere, I'd probably write very different music so it took me to this place, and I was trying to recreate sounds of nature and rainforests within the percussion and the sort of drums and different instruments within the music. So I would talk to the band about this idea of like, how can we kind of capture this? I'd play them a field recording and then say, what, I want you to play in this sort of ambient sort of landscapey way. And we managed to get there. We managed to get some sort of sound and feel to the record that's quite fresh and different to my other records. It's
definitely.
The percussionist he was amazing. The percussionist, he's got a couple of people that make percussion all over the world, and he was ordering like these giant clumps of like seeds and shells and different types of chimes from all over the world, and these big beautiful clumps of Indian bells and stuff. It was quite he actually inspired me. Behind me right now in my studio, I've got a big rack of kind of percussion that you can't really see, but
yeah.
But it's kind of it's great. I love those sounds, those extra textures and kind of feelings that you can put into music without necessarily interfering with the melodic movement. So we went on a mad journey trying to create stuff that sounded like a rainforest, which sounds a bit weird until you listen to the record.
Yeah, it sounds great. It's cool because I mess with field recordings a lot, and I record them myself, but I actually end up putting them into the music a lot. And I'm just curious if you ever thought about, you're representing the energy of that and translating it into the music. Did you ever consider actually bringing in those field recordings, or have you?
I did consider it a lot, actually. And it was kind of, it was touch and go whether to keep them on or not. But I decided to take them off because I thought in some ways it makes it more unusual and exotic by taking them off, because you kind of, their purpose was to inspire and create this atmosphere for us as the musicians, but not necessarily to distract the listener from the musicians and their performance. So I quite liked this idea of like a sort of referencing and kind of being inspired and kind of living in this world. It's a bit like, I guess, the closest thing we could do without any, big financial budgets for recording, to sending the band to a tropical island and recording in some sort of paradise. The cheapest alternative to do this in Manchester was to sit and listen to some exotic sounds.
So you can close your eyes and pretend you're on the beach, or you can go to the beach, but we're gonna just listen. We're gonna meditate our way there. That's cool, man. Yeah, well, I think you did a good job of interpreting that and using it as an influence, and actually sort of not just a loose influence, but like sort of actually bringing in, largely through the percussion, I thought the sounds, translating those sounds, and then it overall you're definitely bringing in some kind of energy that's gluing it together. And I mean, was that kind of like the musical North Star of it, if there was one? Or could you say there was something that glued it like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my albums, that there is a sort of a theme or a direction to the music. They often represent places. Each record sort of captures a certain place for me or a time in my life. So when I was making, one of my records is called Fletcher Moss Park, and that album was composed entirely in the park. I was sat in a beautiful springtime period, just writing on my laptop in the park, and then I took that music to the band and explained where I'd recorded it and how I wanted it to sound. And it often gives you a really nice kind of more relaxed approach to making jazz music when there's a bit more of a direction and a concept. Sometimes there's more pressure if you kind of suddenly like, right, we have to do the most amazing jazz album. But actually what I'm asking the musicians to do is to create something more atmospheric and kind of connected to a certain place. The album On the Go that I recorded was me imagining that I was in a sort of 1960s Paris, sort of black and white film noir kind of feel to it. Very inspired by things like Miles's Lift to the Scaffold and all the Parisian jazz compilations that I sort of had collected over the years. And so each one sort of, when I'm composing, I'm sort of trying to take myself into a different sort of world, and I like a feeling, escapism, which seems to really appeal to my fans as well. They sort of often talk to me about that stuff. So
I dig it. So what are you feeling is the next evolution for jazz, or do you care? Or do you feel like, as far as its relevancy, it's been through an interesting journey the last few decades, where sometimes I feel like I wonder if it's trying to find its place, because its evolution was so, at least looking back, it was very strong, from the beginning of the century through to maybe the end of the 70s. Where do you see it now and where it's moving?
I guess you could say that about most genres. They're sort of, because of the possibilities now with education and listening and recording, and everything's opened up in a really kind of inclusive way. And I think that jazz will continue to mean and be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's kind of, I really like, from a record label perspective, I've been fascinated with the idea of crossover within music. So a lot of the artists on our label seem to cross between, maybe neoclassical music and ambient and electronic music and
Right up my alley. Yeah.
pardon?
I said it's right up my alley.
Yeah, it's kind of, we have a lot of bands like Go-Go Penguin and Mammal Hands and Hanya Rani, a Polish piano player, and Portico Quartet. And they're all like really quite progressive and kind of forward moving with their music. And then there's people like myself on the label, obviously, and mine's sort of both a connection to the past, but also trying to do my own thing and take people on my own journey. And I think that there's nothing wrong with, like, sometimes I really like it when someone makes a super retro sounding record, because it actually sounds really fresh now to hear that, because there's so many people that have got really engrossed in technology. And also I think there's a demand for, like, from a live perspective, people my generation never got to see Alice Coltrane, or occasionally Pharoah Sanders might come to the UK. I've seen him about 6 times, luckily, but
Wow.
it's getting less and less likely for him to be able to tour. So rather than starve that kind of world and that kind of fan base, having younger generations playing music influenced by that is not a bad thing. But everyone's got a different maybe feeling about the journey of jazz, and I'm sure there's some purists out there that would say some music isn't jazz, or some music isn't technical enough to be worthy of the jazz great title or whatever. But I'm quite a mellow, inclusive person, and kind of feel like I want to support and kind of listen to lots of different types of jazz. So
Portico Quartet was Nick. Are you know Nick Mulvey back when he was part of the group?
Yeah. I met Portico Quartet before they even had a record deal. My friend invited me down to London. Well, I was in London. They invited me down to a gig that Portico Quartet were doing, which was just a busking gig on the South Bank in London. And I sat and listened to them play for about 2 hours, and I was totally blown away by their sound, having a hang drum, and just even the way they wrote music and how melodic and different it was to anything else I'd heard. And Nick was in the band then, and I became really good friends with them, and actually said on the South Bank, I bought their CD because they'd made their own CD at that point. But and I said if I had a record label, I would sign you. But I didn't have one then. And 10 years later, I did, and they were looking for the right label and knew that I was a fan. So
that's cool. Yeah, I crossed paths with Nick a year or two ago, and we ended up doing a track together for one of our releases. And he's a great guy. I really like his music, and he's been on the podcast too. So it's cool. A lot of the folks on the label making some really wonderful music and a lot of crossover with our worlds too. So are you feeling good about sort of like the future of labels and the role like independent labels are playing as the music industry continues to evolve in this Wild West digital ecosphere?
Yeah, I mean, my label's really, it's set up by a musician and it's for musicians. It's not a greedy corporate monster. We do everything super straight 50-50 kind of vibes with our artists, and want to support and encourage them and challenge them to be the best possible band or artist or musician they can be. And I set up the record label because there wasn't that many labels that sort of represented the music or personality that I had as an individual. So it's nice to be able to support kindred spirits that are coming through, and give them opportunities to record and work in ways that I didn't get when I was younger. I started the record label with just like £1,000 and managed to convince a couple of great Manchester musicians to record with me, and an engineer to use his gear to do a couple of days of recording. And that first release did really well as a sort of DIY kind of start out record. Got a lot of support from Giles Peterson and Stuart McConey and people in the UK, and really grew my artist profile, and then we kept building, and the label now financially is really, really in a mega healthy place, and we Wonderful. Can kind of do whatever we want, but we're still not just going to sign everything and anything. It's about finding stuff that we really, really genuinely have a connection and care about and want to support. But I think the indie label business is okay. I think we're definitely giving the corporates a good run for their money now, and challenging them. So we just have to see.
Cool. Yeah, it's a really wonderful collection that it speaks to a common thread that speaks to me too. So great on you for doing that. And I love the breadth that's on there, but also like there's something you're holding on to as that North Star we're kind of talking about musically that you definitely can hear, and it makes the musical landscape out there richer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you've got a great record. I hope people can hear it, and it's been wonderful to get to connect with you. What's the best way for people to drop into your world?
I guess the record label website, gondwanarecords.com. Also my own website, matthewhalsall.com. I'm on all the social platforms, and we have lots of nice playlists. There's not on Instagram, on Spotify. We have a Gondwana Records profile, and there's links to lots of eclectic and interesting playlists that myself and other artists have put together, and there's the Worldwide FM show. So yeah, I mean, it's all on there on socials, and a lot of the bands and stuff will be doing live shows, hopefully in the autumn again, and also live streams. So keep your eyes peeled for that, I guess. Yeah.
All right, Matthew, thank you very much. I hope to catch up another time soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Cheers. Thank you, Matthew, for coming on the show. Definitely check out his music. Matthew is Matthew. Halsall is Halsall. The link is in the show notes down there. And this track you're hearing in the background is called Harmony with Nature, and it is from his new record. So, man, as I said, it's a wonderful world, and it's got great vibes, and I think you will enjoy it. Thanks again for reviewing the podcast, for sharing the podcast, and for saying hi on social media. And otherwise, you can always hit us up at info@eastforest.org. And thanks for everyone who's signing up and checking out the East Forest Council on Patreon. I love this experiment together, and I'm continuing to see where it can go, and I appreciate your participation. Check it out, patreon.com/eastforest or eastforest.org, and just scroll down and you shall see the Patreon information about the council. Well, more to come, friends. I'm going to take a walk today outside. It is a beautiful day. I've been working super hard on many things. I know that is vague, but it's important to balance it out with some time in nature to fill up the well, as it were. And I'm going to go do that. My dog is in town, and boy, am I grateful to have Kaya, my OG guru, with me for a few weeks, and I am just spoiling her to death. So I'm going to get her outside, which gets me outside, because really, who's walking the dog anyway? Who's walking who? Keep walking your walk, folks. Don't take any shit, but if you do, grab a dog. Do it with grace.